Hey there, YouTube. Ryu here. Actually had a little discussion with a person on here. Their username is AlexO, and they ended up getting me thinking, and I ended up bringing up how the spawns in Pokemon Go don't make any sense. There's really no rhyme or reason to them. Like, for example, when I was out at one of our lakes that's around here, I ended up finding, Charmanders and Cyndaquils. And the more I think about it, when I've watched videos of other YouTubers going ahead and just playing the game, I've noticed that there really isn't much rhyme or reason to it. And it got me wondering, it's all like, does Niantic even try at this point? I mean, with nest migrations, at the very least, that could be something that they could go ahead and go, all right, well, this Pokemon, would, in some means, show up at this area. But, there's a theory going on now about, why nests are where the nests are. And that is, they're at, they tend to primarily be at places with, sporting areas, at least nearby, Well, the thing is it can't be that they're only at those locations, because up here where I live, at one of our local, near our civic center and near a museum system that we have, we actually have a Pokemon nest. So it's not at an area with a playground or anything like that, but it still has a nest. And it's definitely confirmed to be a nest. The last time I played, it was Magmar that was spawning there. And before that, it was a Bulbasaur nest. So it really got me thinking, because that nest, I could understand it being a Bulbasaur nest because there's, some foresty area around there. There's still some water, so, would be good for them for battling water Pokemon. But then Magmar comes in. It's right next to a river. The area is primarily flooded at just about any time. And I'm wondering why Niantic, if they're really so big on the whole biome thing, is just kind of just willy-nilly spawning Pokemon. Now, I understand that there's, some level of randomness to the game, and there needs to be. I do agree with that. But I've noticed that it tends to be more based off of how many people are playing in an area, how dense the cell activity popularity is in that area. So, why is it that Niantic is sitting there and using biomes and climate or local animals or whatever as an excuse for exclusives, when at no other point in their game do they have that make sense? you would expect in any town or city at that point to go ahead and actually, you know, have electric Pokemon, you know, if they have any type of power production near there. You would expect cities and so on and so forth to primarily have Pokemon like Rattata, maybe even Mr. Mime, but Pokemon that would typically show up in those areas. And as the line goes down, stuff like Pidove and you know, Pokemon like that. So why is it that when I sat there and watched the guy from Trainer Tips, and when I watched Lachlan and all of these other YouTubers playing, and they're playing in these larger cities, why is it that I see all these Pokemon that really have no rhyme or reason for being in a big city, when Niantic says, well, these region exclusives are because of local wildlife or because of the area that it's in, the climate? I mean, yeah, you have some Pokemon that have a higher spawn rate in certain biomes, you know, such as desert biomes. I mean, I live in California, and we have a few areas that are considered a desert biome. So if you ever need a Sandshrew, it's usually only a couple hours drive at that point. So it usually doesn't take too long to get over to, at the very least, the Nevada border. But it begs the question, why is it at beaches and so on and so forth? I mean, yeah, you see a much higher spawn rate of water Pokemon, but if you go to, say, Santa Monica Pier, you know, you find Cyndaquil, you find Chikorita, you find, you know, Porygon, and so on and so forth. Just, it makes really no sense. And it makes a lot of the arguments defending Niantic very disingenuous, or at least seem disingenuous, because Niantic isn't even practicing what they're saying. They're not even giving people this this sense of quote unquote accuracy with their spawns. It basically comes down to what a lot of rural and suburban players are complaining about. It's the big cities are getting all of the spawns, while the outsiders, they sit there and then suddenly use the excuse, oh, well, these are the Pokemon that would show up in this area, or, you know, oh, well, then you need to get more players out there. Well, we don't have any control over other people. Whether we live in a big city or whether we live in a suburban area or a rural area, we don't have any control over that. Why punish the players for living in an area that doesn't have a whole lot of that activity? Why make them drive for hours just to get decent spawns? I mean, starters are supposed to be somewhat rare. That's just, you know, part of the Pokemon universe. That's the reason why they're the starters, you know? I mean, yeah, in X and Y, you can go ahead and find a friend Safari at that point, but at that point, it's kind of a Safari zone. So, you know, those Pokemon are, you know, relatively rare. You know, that's the only place that you can catch starters. So why is it that big cities get all the Pokemon starters in such a major way that they can go ahead and evolve a freshly caught one or a freshly hatched one all the way up in less than a week? I mean, that right there tells you that the spawn rates are insanely high. I can see going ahead and having the, grass starters in parks or near forests or something like that. Water starters on a beach or near a lake or something along those lines. But the fire starters and just fire Pokemon in general have no reason whatsoever to be near a river or a lake. They would avoid that area pretty much at all costs because they're gonna get their ass handed to them. And people can't sit there and say, oh, well, it's Pokemon, it's a kid's game. In the Pokedex entries, it even mentions, Pokemon eating other Pokemon. It being just like the animal world as far as that's concerned. I mean, I understand them not spawning ghost type Pokemon in cemeteries. I get that. It's a respect thing. I understand that. But there was one time they accidentally ended up matching up a Pokemon spawn through the randomness at a pretty funny thing, and that was at a Planned Parenthood clinic. I ended up catching a Ghastly. Right after there was a big hullabaloo about several girls going in and being underage to get an abortion, and yet they were given an abortion. The people ended up knowing that they were underage, but they went ahead and did it anyway. They fudged the paperwork. So I thought that was kind of a funny coincidence. But I mean, if Niantic's going to claim that Pokemon will spawn in areas where where it would be more natural for them to spawn, then go ahead and have that. But don't sit there and break that rule for your whales. Don't do that. I mean, at that point, it completely nullifies any defense of you. And it just shows that Niantic definitely has that double standard when it comes to quote-unquote quality of player. Basically, how big is your wallet? How likely are you to spend money? How popular is the game in your area? And you would think that they would want to, help the people in those outlying areas because, I mean, they're having a harder time of it. They're saying that they want everyone to have fun, and yet, by everyone, they mean everyone in a big city. Everyone who thinks that $2,000 a month for a flat is no big deal. Basically, people with a high amount of expendable income. This is a major issue, and the thing is Niantic could get me to come back and play the game, but like I said, their attitude towards those outlying players definitely needs to change. They need to update all of that. They need to get their game mechanics actually locked down. And this is just one more thing where the longer they peddle the bullshit, the harsher I'm going to be on them. Because the thing is I'm a huge fan of the Pokemon series, and I hate seeing Nintendo trust someone like Niantic who very obviously doesn't have Pokemon fans in any decision-making portion of their staff. So they definitely need to go ahead and, figure out that, telling people that they have to travel for hours to go ahead and just have a chance at finding someone to trade with isn't a good idea. Saying that you have to be in close proximity to someone to trade, again, another really big problem. I mean, at that point, it's posing a safety risk. But they also need to go ahead, and if they're going to go ahead and use an excuse of, oh, well, this is the type of Pokemon that would spawn here, they need to go ahead and apply that equally to everyone. They need to stop saying, oh, well, in a big city, any Pokemon can spawn. That's not how it's gonna work. Go ahead and play one of the core Pokemon games. You don't have anything even remotely close to that. Pokemon are in very specific areas, and it's areas that match their typing typically. Like, you find electric types near power plant. You find ground types out in the desert. You find dark types at nighttime. You find there's certain Pokemon that you only find during the day. Fire types tend to be near a burned down building or a volcano. Water types are, of course, near water, typically. I mean, you have your dual type Pokemon so that you can go ahead and spawn in multiple areas. But for the most part, they need to go ahead and actually, for one, get breeding up and running, and two, they need to rethink their ideas of trading. Then they also need to go ahead and start applying their logic universally instead of selectively. So thanks, Alexo, for the conversation. Absolutely enjoyed it. Big shout out to you. I mean, if you're watching this video and you think that it makes any kind of sense, go ahead. Send it out on Twitter to Niantic. Maybe if they see that people are actually really paying attention, even if people aren't the biggest fan of them, they're sitting there and telling them, hey, here's what you need to do. These are the things that you're screwing up on. Go ahead, send it to them. I mean, they won't listen to me, but maybe, one of the other big YouTubers will see it and start to speak out, and, someone who has a real reach will start saying things. I don't expect Trainer Tips to do it. In fact, I expect Trainer Tips, if he was to do anything, to sit there and try to argue against what I've just said, because he definitely seems to be very much so in the camp of, well, it's no problem that the big cities get all of these spawns and that no one else gets anything. At least that's the feeling that I got from him. So go ahead, if you agree, go ahead, leave a like. You can subscribe. Remember, this isn't a Pokemon Go specific channel, but I mean, I'll go ahead and I talk about a bunch of other games. I talk about just gaming in general. Yes, there is some politics on here, but I mean, you don't have to watch those videos, or you can if you are one of those people that actually likes listening to dissenting opinion. So, have a good day, YouTube. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. I'll talk to you later.